You'll never see them again. My name is Anthony, and I'm 47 years old. Those words came through the phone from Milan at 3 in the morning. My wife had taken our 2 kids and moved to Italy with her business partner, just like that. No warning, no custody hearing. She told me I couldn't afford to fight it, and she was right. I'd been working at a trucking warehouse in Nashville for the last 12 years, barely keeping the lights on. The divorce papers showed up 2 weeks after she left. I signed them in the break room during lunch. I didn't yell or throw anything. I just sat there, pen in hand, staring at the dotted line. My buddy Travis asked if I was okay. I said I was fine. He didn't believe me, but he didn't press it either. That's how it goes when you're a man in your 40s and life falls apart. People expect you to handle it quietly. The kids were 8 and 10, Jacob and Lily. I hadn't seen them in 3 months. My ex-wife, Sophie, sent pictures sometimes, beach trips, fancy dinners. Her partner's name was Marco. He owned some kind of consulting firm. I didn't know much about him except that he had money, and I didn't. That seemed to be all that mattered. I couldn't afford a lawyer. I'd called 6 of them. The cheapest retainer was $5,000. I had $800 in my checking account and a mortgage 2 months behind. My truck needed new brakes, and the washing machine was broken. I was living on ramen and peanut butter sandwiches, trying to figure out how to send money for the kids' birthdays. Sophie's lawyer sent letters every few weeks, legal jargon I could barely understand. Something about international custody and jurisdiction. I tried reading them, but the words blurred together. I knew what they meant, though I was losing. I'd already lost. Work became the only thing that made sense. I started coming in early, staying late, loading pallets, driving forklifts, keeping my head down. The guys that didn't ask questions. We talked about football and the weather. Nobody mentioned families. It was easier that way. One night, I came home to find an eviction notice taped to my door. 30 days. I pulled it down and stuffed it into my jacket pocket without finishing the rest. I already knew what it said. I'd been expecting it. Inside, the house was silent. Too silent. The kids' room still had their posters on the walls. Jacob's soccer trophies sat on the shelf. Lily's stuffed animals were piled on her bed. I hadn't touched a thing. Part of me hoped they'd come back. Another part knew they wouldn't. I sat on the couch, staring at the coffee table, a stack of unopened bills, a photo album Sophie left behind, a chipped coffee mug. I picked up the mug and turned it over in my hands. It had belonged to my grandfather. He'd given it to me when I was 20, said it would bring me luck. I didn't feel lucky. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie, asking if I could send money for Jacob's school supplies. I checked my bank account. $12. I didn't reply. The next morning, I drove to a pawn shop on the east side. I'd been putting it off for weeks, but I didn't have a choice anymore. My grandfather's watch was the only thing I owned worth anything. He'd worn it every day for 50 years, a gold omega engraved with his initials. When he died, my grandmother gave it to me, said I was the only one who deserved it. I hated the thought of selling it, but I needed the money. The kids needed it. I told myself it was just a watch, just a thing. It didn't matter. The guy behind the counter barely looked up. He was scrolling through his phone, chewing gum. I placed the watch on the counter. He picked it up, squinted, then set it down. $300, he said. It's worth more than that. Not to me. I wanted to argue, to tell him about my grandfather, about the 50 years, about the initials, but I didn't. I just nodded and took the cash. $300. It felt like nothing. It felt like everything. On my way out, I noticed a small wooden box tucked behind the display case. The guy saw me looking and waved his hand. That came with the watch. You want it? Take it. No charge. I didn't remember a box. My grandmother had given me the watch in a velvet pouch, but I took it anyway. Maybe it was worth something. I didn't open the box until I got home. It was old, handmade, with a brass latch that stuck when I tried to pry it open. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. I unfolded it carefully, afraid it might tear. It was a hospital document dated 1979, the year I was born. The heading read, Incident Report, Baby Switched at Birth. Investigation closed. I read it 3 times before the words sank in. 2 names were listed. One was mine, Anthony. The other, a name I didn't recognize. The document said 2 babies born the same day had been accidentally switched. The hospital discovered the mistake 6 weeks later. An investigation was opened, then closed. No explanation. No further action taken. I set the paper on the coffee table and stared at it. My hands were shaking. I didn't know what to think. Didn't know what to feel. I picked it up again and read the parents' names. Not my parents. Not the people who raised me. Different names. Different people. I called my mother. She lived in a nursing home in Knoxville. She'd had a stroke 2 years earlier and didn't always remember things clearly. When she answered, her voice was thin and uncertain. "Mom, it's Anthony." "Anthony who?" "Your son." There was a long pause. Then she said softly, "Oh, yes. How are you, sweetheart?" I asked her about the hospital, about 1979, about whether anything strange had happened when I was born. She said she didn't remember. Said everything had been normal. Told me I was imagining things. Told me to stop bothering her with questions. I hung up and sat in the dark for a long time. The document was still on the table. I picked it up again and looked at the other family's name, Donovan. I didn't know anyone by that name. Had never even heard it before. But something in my chest tightened, a feeling I couldn't explain, one that told me this mattered, that this changed everything. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the document, the names, what it all could mean. If the hospital really had switched the babies, it meant the people who raised me weren't my biological parents. It meant my real parents were out there somewhere. And if the other family's name was Donovan, maybe I could find them. The next morning, I called in sick and went to the public library. I didn't have a computer at home, and my old phone could barely do more than call or text. The librarian showed me how to use the search database. I typed in the name Donovan and the year 1979. Nothing. Then I tried adding Nashville. Still nothing. I tried every combination I could think of. Birth records, hospital files, news articles. 4 hours later, my eyes burned from staring at the screen. Finally, I found something, a short article from a local newspaper, dated 1980. The headline read, "Prominent Nashville Family Welcomes New Child." The piece mentioned a couple named William and Catherine Donovan. They'd adopted a baby boy after their biological son had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. The article was brief, with a grainy photo of the couple standing in front of a large house. I stared at that photo for a long time. The man was tall, silver-haired, dressed in a shop suit. The woman looked elegant, smiling, holding a baby wrapped in a blanket. They looked wealthy, really wealthy, the kind of people who drove expensive cars on vacation in Europe. I printed the article and folded it into my pocket. Then I searched for more about the Donovans. It didn't take long. William and Catherine Donovan own a hotel chain, not just a few properties, but an entire empire. Over 30 hotels across the southern United States. The company was worth hundreds of millions. I felt sick, not from fear or anger, just a hollow ache deep in my stomach. These people could have been my parents. They could have raised me. I could have grown up in a mansion instead of a 2-bedroom house with a leaking roof. I could have gone to private schools, had opportunities, lived a life that made sense. But instead, I was raised by a construction worker and a waitress. My father died of a heart attack when I was 16. My mother could barely keep the lights on. I'd worked since I was 14, bagging groceries, mowing lawns, doing whatever I could to help. I never went to college, never had a real chance. Now I was 47, divorced, broke, living in a house I was about to lose. My kids were in Italy with a man who had more money than I'd ever see. I couldn't afford a lawyer, couldn't afford to fight, couldn't afford much of anything. But the Donovans could. They had everything. And if that hospital document was real, if I was truly their son, then maybe I had a claim. Maybe I had a right to something. I spent the next week researching. Found out that William and Catherine Donovan were now 7 to 9. They'd retired years ago, handing the business to their adopted son, Jonathan. He ran the company from an office in Memphis. I found photos of him online. Polished, confident, the kind of man who never had to worry about anything. I also found their address. They lived in a gated community outside Nashville, a place called Belm. I'd driven past it a few times. Iron gates, manicured lawns, homes that looked like museums. I didn't know what to do with the information. Part of me wanted to call them. Another part wanted to show up at their door and shove a document in their faces. But a deeper part of me was afraid. What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I was lying? What if they didn't care? I talked to Travis at work, told him pieces of it, left out the rest. He listened, nodded, and said, "Man, if you got proof, you got to do something. You can't just let this sit." He was right. I couldn't let it sit. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I had to know the truth. So I wrote a letter, short and to the point. I said I had reason to believe I was their biological son. Said I had a hospital document proving it. Said I just wanted to meet and talk. I didn't ask for money or make demands, just asked for conversation. I mailed it on a Friday. Then I waited. 2 weeks passed. Nothing. I started to think they'd ignored it, thrown it away, figured I was some scammer. Then, one Tuesday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me. "Is this Anthony?" The voice was calm, professional, a woman's voice. "Yeah. My name is Catherine Donovan. I received your letter." I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. "We'd like to meet with you," she said. "If you're willing." "Willing. Can you come to our home this Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon?" "Yeah, I'll be there." She gave me the address, even though I already knew it. Then she paused. "Anthony, you need to understand something. If what you're saying is true, it's going to change a lot for all of us." "I understand." "Good. We'll see you Saturday." She hung up. I sat there with the phone still in my hand, staring at the wall. I didn't know what I had just set in motion, didn't know where it would lead. But for the first time in months, I felt something besides despair. I felt hope. Saturday came slowly. I spent the whole week trying to clean myself up. Got a haircut, shaved, ironed my one good shirt. I didn't own a suit, but I had a pair of khakis and a button-down that looked decent enough. I polished my boots until they shined. The drive to Belm took about 20 minutes. I'd been awake since 5 that morning, too anxious to sleep. The hospital document sat in a folder on the passenger seat, and every few minutes I glanced at it, making sure it was still there. The gated entrance to their community had a security guard. I gave him my name. He checked the list and waved me through. Inside, the houses were enormous, stone fronts, circular driveways, fountains in the yards. I felt completely out of place. My truck sputtered and coughed as I passed mansions that looked like they belonged in movies. The Donovan house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, 3 stories, white columns, a wide wraparound porch. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. When I finally knocked, the door opened almost instantly. A woman stood there, older, gray hair pulled into a neat bun, wearing a simple dress and a string of pearls. Her eyes were sharp, assessing. "Anthony," she said. "Yes. I'm Catherine. Please, come in." The inside of the house was even more impressive than the outside. Marble floors, tall ceilings, chandeliers, oil paintings lining the walls, and a grand staircase curling toward the second floor. It felt like stepping into a museum. Catherine led me to a sitting room where a man was standing by the fireplace. He was tall, silver-haired, dressed in a sweater and slacks. He looked at me with the same piercing eyes as Catherine. "This is my husband, William," she said. William extended his hand. I shook it. His grip was firm, steady. "Please, sit," Catherine said. I sat on a leather sofa while they took their places in matching chairs across from me. For a while, no one spoke. The silence was thick, uneasy. Then William finally said, "You brought the document." I handed him the folder. He opened it and read through the hospital report carefully. Catherine leaned over his shoulder, reading along. I watched their faces, the way her eyes widened, the way his jaw tightened. When they finished, William set the folder on the coffee table and looked at me for a long time. Then he said quietly, "Do you know what this means?" I think so. We had a son, Catherine said, her voice trembling. We named him Anthony. He was born the same day as you, in the same hospital. 6 weeks later, he disappeared from his crib. The police said it was an abduction. They searched for months but never found him. We never stopped looking, William added. Even after the case was closed, we kept searching, hired private investigators, offered rewards. Nothing. It was like he vanished into thin air. Catherine wiped her eyes. Eventually, we adopted Jonathan. We wanted someone to love, to raise, but we never stopped thinking about our first son, about what happened to him, where he was. And now you're here, William said, claiming to be him. I'm not claiming anything, I said. I just want to know the truth. William nodded slowly. We can arrange a DNA test. That will settle it. Okay. Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out at the yard. If you are our son, she said softly, then the people who raised you took you from us. They stole you. I didn't say a word. I didn't know what to say. William leaned forward. Tell me about your life, Anthony. Tell me how you were raised. So I did. I told him about my father, the construction worker who died when I was 16. About my mother, the waitress who worked double shifts to keep food on the table. About the tiny apartment, the struggles, the years I'd spent working just to get by. I told him about my ex-wife, about my kids in Italy, about the divorce, the eviction notice, and the $300 I got for my grandfather's watch. I didn't try to dress it up. I didn't leave anything out. I just told him the truth. When I finished, Catherine was crying. William's face was hard, but his eyes were wet. We'll do the DNA test, William said. But I already know. I can see it in your face. You're our son. 3 days later, the results came back, 99.9% match. I was their biological child. The hospital had switched me with another baby. My parents, the people who raised me, had taken me home and never looked back. Whether they knew about the mix-up or not, I didn't know. But it didn't matter anymore. Catherine called as soon as she got the results. She was crying. You're ours, she kept saying. You're ours. They invited me back to the house. This time, Jonathan was there. He was polite but distant, shook my hand, said it was good to meet me, then excused himself to take a call. I could tell he wasn't thrilled about my sudden arrival. William and Catherine sat me down and told me everything, about the night I disappeared, about the investigation revealed how they had blamed themselves for years, never letting go of the hope that I might one day return. Then William said quietly, we want to make this right. We want to give you what you should have had from the start. I don't want your money, I told him. It's not about what you want, Catherine replied gently. It's about what's right. You're our son. You deserve to be part of this family. William handed me a folder. Inside were legal documents, a trust fund in my name, backdated to my birth. It had been accumulating for 47 years. The balance showed over $4 million. I stared at the figure, $4 million. I had never seen that kind of money before, couldn't even grasp what it meant. This is yours, William said. No strings attached. It's what we would have given you if you'd been with us all along. I was speechless. My thoughts spun wildly. $4 million. Enough to pay off my house, hire a lawyer, fight for my children, bring them home. But then I caught sight of Jonathan standing in the doorway, watching. His expression was cold, unreadable. That's when it hit me. This wasn't only about me. It was about him, too. He'd been their son for 47 years, and now I'd appeared, threatening to take that away. I folded the papers carefully and handed them back to William. I need time to think. Catherine looked pained. Think about what? All of it, I said. I just learned my whole life was a lie. I need time to process. William nodded slowly. Take all the time you need. But remember this, Anthony, you're our son. Nothing changes that. I left the house and drove home, my hands trembling on the wheel. I kept thinking about the $4 million, what it could do, how it could change everything. But I also thought about the people who raised me, my father, who worked himself to death, and my mother, now alone in a nursing home. They weren't perfect or wealthy, but they had fed me, clothed me, and taught me how to survive. Now I had to decide what came next. 2 weeks passed after the DNA test before I heard from Sophie. I considered calling her, telling her everything, but I didn't know how to begin, or if she'd even care. She'd moved on with Marco, the kids, and her new life in Milan. I was just the ex-husband who couldn't pay child support. Then one night, close to midnight, she called. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the trust fund papers William had given me. I'd been doing that every night since a meeting, for $1 million, and it still didn't feel real. Anthony, her voice was sharp, impatient. Yeah, I need to talk to you about something. Okay. Jacob's school called. They said you haven't sent any money for his supplies. He's been borrowing from other kids. It's embarrassing. I said nothing, just held the phone. Are you even listening? She snapped. I'm listening. Then do something about it. I can't keep covering for you. Marco's been paying for everything. The kids' clothes, their food, their school. You're their father. You need to step up. I'm trying. Trying isn't good enough. She hung up before I could answer. I set the phone down and stared again at the documents for $1 million. Enough to buy Jacob's school supplies 100 times over. Enough to fly to Italy, hire a lawyer, fight for custody. Enough to change everything. But I still hadn't signed anything. I kept thinking about Jonathan, the way he looked at me like I didn't belong. The next morning, I went to see Travis at work. He was loading a truck when I pulled up. He waved, wiped his hands on his jeans, and walked over. You look like hell, he said. I feel like it. What's going on? I told him everything. The Donovans, the trust fund, the $4 million. He stared at me for a long moment. $4 million. Yeah, and I haven't taken it. Not yet? Why the hell not? Because it's complicated. Complicated. He shook his head. Man, you're broke. You're about to lose your house. Your ex is in Italy with your kids. What's complicated about that? The Donovans already have a son, Jonathan. He's been their kid for 4 to 7 years. If I take the money, if I become part of the family, what happens to him? Who cares? Travis said, You're their real son. That money's yours. You earned it by birth. You deserve it. Do I? Yeah, you do. But I wasn't sure. I'd been raised to work for everything I had, to earn it. This felt like charity, and I didn't know if I could live with that. That afternoon, I drove to the Donovan house without calling ahead. The guard recognized me and waved me through. Catherine opened the door, surprised but smiling. Anthony, she said warmly, come in. I followed her to the sitting room, where William was reading the newspaper. He set it aside as soon as he saw me. Have you made a decision? He asked. I need to ask you something first, I said. What happens to Jonathan if I take the money? William frowned. What do you mean? I mean, he's been your son for 4 to 7 years. If I step into the family, if I accept the trust fund, does that change anything for him? Catherine sat down slowly. Jonathan will always be our son. Nothing changes that. But he's not your biological son, I said quietly. I am. Doesn't that matter? Of course it matters, William replied. But it doesn't change how we feel about Jonathan. We love him, and we always will. Does he know that? I asked. William didn't respond. Catherine looked away. I saw the way he looked at me. I said, he doesn't want me here. He thinks I'm going to take something from him. He's adjusting, Catherine said softly. This is difficult for him, too. Then maybe I shouldn't take the money, I said. Maybe I should just walk away, let things stay the way they were. No, William said firmly. You're our son. You deserve to be part of this family. That money is yours. It always has been. But what if I don't want it? I said. Catherine stood, her voice trembling. Then what do you want, Anthony? I didn't know how to answer. I wanted my kids back. I wanted my life to make sense. I wanted to stop feeling like I was drowning, but I didn't know if money could fix any of that. I left without signing a thing. Drove home and sat in the driveway for an hour, staring at the eviction notice still taped to my door. 30 days. I had less than 2 weeks now. That night, I called my mother. She sounded more lucid than usual, recognized my voice immediately. "Anthony, sweetheart, how are you?" "I need to ask you something, Mom." "What is it?" "When I was born, was there anything unusual? Anything the hospital told you?" She was silent for a moment. Then, cautiously, she asked, "Why are you asking me this?" "Just answer the question." "Nothing was unusual," she said. "You were a healthy baby. We brought you home. That's all." "Did anyone ever tell you I might not be your son?" There was a long pause. Too long. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about," she said finally, her voice tight and defensive. "I found a document," I said, "from the hospital. It says 2 babies were switched. One of them was me." She said nothing. "Did you know?" I asked. "I need to go," she said. "Mom, did you know?" She hung up. I called her back 3 times. She didn't answer. The next morning, I drove to Knoxville. The nursing home was an hour away. I hadn't visited her in months, couldn't afford the gas, but I had to see her. I needed to look her in the eyes. She was sitting in the common room, staring at the television. She didn't look up when I sat down. "Mom," I said, "I don't want to talk about this," she whispered. "I need to know the truth." She turned toward me, her eyes red and watery. "Your father and I loved you. That's the truth. But did you know I wasn't yours?" She looked away. "We suspected. And you didn't say anything." "What were we supposed to do?" she said, her voice breaking. "The hospital closed the investigation. We'd already brought you home. You were ours. We couldn't just give you back. So you kept me. We raised you," she said. "We gave you everything we had." "You gave me scraps," I said bitterly, "while my real parents were millionaires." She started to cry. "We did the best we could." I stood up. "I know, but your best wasn't enough." I walked out without saying goodbye. The drive back to Nashville was a blur, my hand gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. When I pulled into the driveway, a black Mercedes was parked there. Jonathan leaned against it, arms crossed. "We need to talk," he said. I didn't want to talk, didn't want to hear whatever he had to say. But he was blocking the driveway, and I was too tired to argue. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want you to walk away." "From what?" "From my parents, from the money, from all of it." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. "Your parents? They are not your parents. They are mine." "They be my family for 47 years, Jonathan shot back. "You don't get to just show up and take that away." "I'm not taking anything away," I said. "I'm just claiming what's mine." "What's yours?" He stepped closer. "You didn't grow up with them. You didn't spend holidays together. You didn't build a business with them. You're a stranger." "And whose fault is that?" I said, "I didn't ask to be switched at birth. I didn't ask for any of this." "Neither did I," he said. "But here we are." We stood there, locked in silence. I could see the anger in his eyes, and the fear. He was terrified I might take everything from him. And maybe, deep down, I might. "I'm offering you a deal," he said. "I'm listening. Walk away. Don't sign the trust fund papers. Don't come to the house anymore. In return, I'll give you $100,000. Cash. No strings attached." I laughed, shaking my head. $100,000? The trust fund's worth $4 million. "I know," he said evenly, "but $100,000 is more than you've ever had. It's enough to get your life back on track, pay your debts, fight for your kids. You don't need $4 million for that." "And what do you get out of it?" I asked. "I get my family back," he said. "I get to keep what I built. You walk away, and we never see each other again." I thought about it. $100,000 was a lot of money, enough to hire a lawyer, pay off the house, bring my kids home. I could start over. I could leave the Donovans behind, pretend none of this had ever happened. But then I thought about the trust fund, the $4 million that was mine, the life I should have had, everything I'd lost because of a hospital's mistake. No, I said finally. Jonathan's jaw tightened. No, I'm not walking away. You're making a mistake, he said. Maybe, I replied, but it's my mistake to make. He turned, got into his car, and drove off without another word. I watched his tail lights disappear, then went inside. The house was dark, quiet. I sat on the couch and stared at the trust fund papers again. $4 million. Enough to change everything. Enough to destroy everything. I didn't know what to do. The next day, I went back to the Donovan house, this time with a lawyer. His name was Paul, a young attorney I'd found through a referral. He was sharp, ambitious, and willing to work for a percentage instead of a retainer. We sat in the sitting room while William and Catherine listened. My client is entitled to the trust fund, Paul began. The DNA test confirms he's your biological son. The trust was established for him. It's legally his. We're not disputing that, William said calmly. We want him to have it. Then why hasn't he signed the papers? Paul asked. Because it's conflicted, Catherine said softly. She turned to me. Anthony, we don't want you to feel pressured. This is your decision. I just want to make sure Jonathan's okay, I said quietly. William sighed. Jonathan's struggling with this. We all are. But it doesn't change the fact that you're our son. You deserve this money. Does he know you feel that way? I asked. We've told him, Catherine said, but is not ready to accept it. Paul leaned forward. With all due respect, Jonathan's feelings aren't the issue here. This is about what's legally and morally right. Anthony is your biological son. The trust fund belongs to him. It's not that simple, I said. Yes, it is, Paul insisted. He turned to me. You've lived your whole life in poverty because of a mistake that wasn't your fault. These people owe you. You have every right to take what's yours. I looked at William and Catherine. They didn't speak, just watched me, waiting for my decision. I need time, I said finally. Paul frowned. Time for what? To figure this out. I stood up. I'm sorry. I just need more time. I left before anyone could stop me. Paul followed me out to the driveway, shaking his head. You're making a mistake, he said. If you don't sign those papers, someone else will. Jonathan, probably. He'll find a way to cut you out. I doubt that, I said. You don't know these people, Paul replied. Money changes everything. Trust me. I drove home and sat in the driveway again. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. She was asking about the school supplies again. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I'll take care of it. She didn't reply. That night, my phone rang. It was Jonathan. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. I talked to my parents, he said, his voice calm but cold. They want you to take the money. They think it's the right thing to do. And what do you think? I asked. I think you're going to destroy this family, he said. That's not my intention. Intentions don't matter, he snapped. You're already tearing us apart. My parents are fighting. My mother won't stop crying. My father's talking about changing his will. This is breaking them. I'm sorry, I said quietly. Are you? He asked. Because it doesn't sound like you care. I care, I said, but I also care about my kids. My life, about what I'm owed. You're not owed anything, Jonathan said. You were raised by other people. You had a different life. You can't just show up and expect to take ours. I'm not trying to take yours, I said. I'm just trying to claim mine. He hung up. I sat there, the phone still in my hand, staring blankly at the wall. I felt exhausted, bone-deep tired. Tired of fighting, tired of being broke, tired of never belonging anywhere. But I wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Paul and told him to prepare the papers. I was going to sign the trust fund. I was going to take the money. And I was going to fight for my kids. Paul sounded thrilled. You're doing the right thing, he said. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I was sure of one thing. I was done being a victim. I was done letting other people dictate my life. It was time to take control. 2 days later, the papers were ready. Paul came over and spread them across my kitchen table. There were a dozen pages, filled with legal terms I barely understood. But the message was clear. I was accepting the trust fund. For $1 million. Mine. Sign here, Paul said, pointing to the bottom of the first page. I picked up the pen. My hand hovered above the paper. I thought of Jonathan, the look on his face when I refused to walk away. Catherine's tears. William's silence. Are you sure about this? I asked. Absolutely, Paul said. This is your money. You're entitled to it. I signed the first page, then the second, then the third. By the time I was done, my hand ached. Paul gathered the papers neatly into a folder. Congratulations, he said. You're a millionaire. The words didn't feel real. I nodded, but felt nothing, no relief, no happiness, just emptiness. After Paul left, I sat there for a long time. The house was silent, too silent. I picked up my phone and called Sophie. She answered on the third ring. What do you want? She asked. I'm coming to Italy, I said. What? I'm coming to get the kids. She laughed bitterly. With what money? You can't even afford school supplies. I have money now, I said, and I'm hiring a lawyer. A good one. I'm fighting for custody. There was a long pause. Then she said, You're bluffing. I'm not. Where did you get the money? She demanded. That doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that I'm coming, and I'm bringing the kids home. She hung up. I set the phone down and stared at the wall. I didn't know if I could actually do it, or if I could win, but I had to try. The next day, I went to the Donovan house to tell them I'd signed the papers. Catherine was in the garden when I arrived. She looked up and smiled as soon as she saw me. Anthony, she said warmly, I'm glad you're here. I signed the papers, I said. Her smile widened. That's wonderful. Is it? I asked. She set down the gardening shears in her hand. What do you mean? Jonathan's not happy about this, I said, and neither are you. I can see it. We want what's best for you, she said softly. But not for him, I replied. She didn't respond, just looked at me with those sharp eyes. The same eyes William had. The same eyes I saw in the mirror every morning. I don't want to hurt anyone, I said quietly. But I can't keep living like this. I can't keep pretending I don't deserve better. You do deserve better, she said, and we're going to make sure you get it. At what cost? I asked. She didn't have an answer. I left without seeing William, drove home, and began making plans. I booked a flight to Milan, hired an international custody lawyer, started filling out forms, gathering documents, building a case. It was expensive. The lawyer alone cost $50,000 up front. But I had the money now. I could afford it. 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Italy. The flight felt endless, uncomfortable. I couldn't sleep. I just sat there, staring out the window, thinking about Jacob and Lily, about how long it had been since I'd seen them, how much they'd changed. When I landed in Milan, I took a cab to Sophie's apartment. She lived in a nice area, tall buildings, clean streets, expensive cars. I stood outside her door for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. Then I knocked. Marco opened the door. He was tall, tan, dressed in a crisp white shirt and slacks. He looked at me like I was dirt under his shoe. "Can I help you?" he said. "I'm here to see my kids," I said. "Sophie's not home." "I don't care. I want to see my kids." He crossed his arms. "You can't just show up here unannounced." "Watch me," I said, brushing past him. The apartment was beautiful. High ceilings, marble floors, expensive furniture. Everything I couldn't give my children. Everything Marco could. Jacob and Lily were in the living room watching TV. They looked up as I walked in. For a second, they didn't recognize me. Then Lily's face lit up. "Dad!" she screamed. "Would you like me to continue Rory?" She ran to me and threw her arms around my waist. Jacob followed, more hesitant, but he hugged me 2. I miss you guys, I said. We miss you, too, Lily said. Sophie came home an hour later. She walked in and froze when she saw me on the couch with the kids. What are you doing here? She said, I told you I was coming. I said, you can't just take them. She said, I'm not taking them. I said, I'm filing for custody and I'm going to win. She left with what? You're broke. Not anymore, I said. Her smile faded. What are you talking about? I told her everything about the Donovans, about the DNA test, about the trust fund. She listened, her face going pale. $4 million? She said, yeah. She looked at Marco. He was standing in the doorway, arms crossed, glaring at me. This changes things, she said. Yeah. I said, it does. The custody battle took 6 months. It was brutal. Sophie fought hard, but I fought harder. I had the money now, the resources, the lawyers, and I had the truth. I was their father. I deserved to be in their lives. The court ruled in my favor. Joint custody. The kids would spend half the year with me, half with Sophie. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. When I brought Jacob and Lily back to Nashville, they were nervous. The house was small, nothing like Sophie's apartment in Milan, but it was home and it was theirs. Is this where we're going to live? Jacob asked. Yeah, I said. For now. It's nice, Lily said, even though it wasn't. That night, I tucked them into their old beds. They fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the flight. I sat in the living room and stared at the coffee table. The trust fund documents were still there, folded and signed. I'd won. I got to my kids back, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. And I realized that's all it had ever been, survival. For 47 years, I've been surviving, working, struggling, scraping by. And now, even with $4 million, I was still just trying to survive. But at least I had my kids. At least I had that. 3 months after the custody ruling, I got a call from Catherine. She wanted to meet for lunch. I hadn't seen her or William since I'd signed the trust fund papers. Hadn't seen Jonathan either. I'd been too busy settling the kids in, enrolling them in school, trying to build some kind of normal life. But I agreed to meet her. We went to a quiet restaurant in downtown Nashville. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, hands folded in her lap. Anthony, she said, thank you for coming. Of course, I said. We ordered coffee. She didn't touch Hayes, just sat there staring at me with those sharp eyes. How are the kids? She asked. They are good, I said, adjusting. I'm glad. We sat in silence for a moment. Then she said, I need to tell you something about Jonathan. What about him? He's been struggling, she said, ever since you signed the papers. He's not the same. He's angry, distant. He barely speaks to us anymore. I'm sorry, I said. Are you? She asked. Her voice was soft, but there was an edge to it. Yeah, I said. I never wanted to hurt him. But you did, she said. You took something from him. Something he thought was his. It was never his. I said it was mine. She looked down at her coffee. I know, but he doesn't see it that way. That's not my problem, I said. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes. Not sadness, not regret, anger. You're right, she said. It's not your problem. It's ours, and we have to live with it. She stood and left without saying goodbye. I sat there staring at her untouched coffee, feeling like I just lost something I didn't know I had. A week later, I got a call from Paul. He sounded excited. You're not going to believe this, he said. What? Jonathan's trying to contest the trust fund. He's claiming you coerced William and Catherine into giving it to you. I laughed. That's ridiculous. I know, Paul said, but it's serious. He's hired a lawyer. They are filing a motion to have the trust fund revoked. Can they do that? I asked. Probably not, Paul said, but they can make things difficult. Drag it out in court. Cost you a lot of money. Let them try, I said. Jonathan's lawsuit went nowhere. The DNA test was ironclad. The trust fund was legally mine. His lawyer withdrew the motion after 3 months, but the damage was done. The Donovan family was fractured. William and Catherine barely spoke to Jonathan anymore. And Jonathan blamed me for all of it. I didn't care. I had my kids. I had my life. I didn't need the Donovans. Didn't need their approval. Didn't need anything from them. But then 6 months after the custody ruling, I got another call. This time from William. His voice was weak, strained. "Anthony," he said, "I need to see you." "What's wrong?" "I'm dying," he said. I went to the hospital that afternoon. William was in a private room, hooked up to machines. Catherine was sitting beside him holding his hand. She looked exhausted. "Anthony," William said when he saw me. His voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm here," I said. "I need to tell you something," he said before it's too late. I sat down. Catherine looked away. "What is it?" I asked. "I'm changing my will," he said. "I'm leaving the company to you." I stared at him. "What?" "You're my son," he said. "You deserve it." "What about Jonathan?" I asked. "He'll get his share," William said. "But the company is yours. It's always been yours." "I don't want it," I said. "It doesn't matter," William said. "It's yours." He died 2 days later. The funeral was small, private. Jonathan didn't speak to me, didn't even look at me. Catherine was stoic, composed, but I could see the pain in her eyes. After the funeral, the will was read. William had kept his word. The hotel chain was mine. Jonathan got a trust fund, investments, properties. But the company, the empire, was mine. Jonathan stood when the lawyer finished reading. He looked at me, his face pale, his hands shaking. "You did this," he said. "You destroyed this family." "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just took what was mine." "You're not my brother," he said. "You never will be." He walked out and I never saw him again. Running the hotel chain wasn't easy. I didn't know anything about hotels, about business, about managing people. But I learned. I hired advisors, consultants, people who knew what they were doing. Slowly, I figured it out. The kids adjusted to the new life. Jacob started playing soccer again. Lily made friends at school. They still spent half the year with Sophie and Milan. But when they were with me, they were happy, and that was all that mattered. Catherine and I stayed in touch. Not often, just occasional phone calls, emails. She was polite, distant. I got the sense she blamed me for William's death, for Jonathan's estrangement. But she never said it, just kept her distance. One day, about a year after William died, I got a package in the mail. It was from Jonathan. Inside was a letter. I opened it carefully, expecting anger, accusations. But the letter was short, simple. "You won," it said. "I hope it was worth it." I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. The years passed. The kids grew up. Jacob went to college. Lily started high school. I ran the company, expanded it, made it more successful than it had ever been. I bought a bigger house, a nicer car. I had everything I'd ever wanted. But sometimes late at night, I'd sit on the porch and think about the people who raised me, about my father who died working himself to death, about my mother alone in the nursing home, about the life I could have had if the hospital hadn't made a mistake. And I'd wonder if it was all worth it. The money, the company, the revenge, if it was worth the cost. I didn't have an answer. Still don't. But I had my kids, and that was enough. Jonathan never recovered from the will. The trust fund William left him was substantial, but it wasn't the empire. It wasn't the legacy. He'd spent his whole life building that company with William, and in one stroke, it was gone. I heard through Catherine that he'd moved to Europe, started a small consulting firm. He never married, never had kids, just drifted from city to city, angry and alone. Catherine passed away 5 years after William. She left me a letter, too. In it, she said she didn't regret finding me, didn't regret the DNA test or the trust fund or any of it. She said I was her son, and she was grateful to have known me, even if it was only for a few years. But she also said she wished things had been different, wished the hospital had never made the mistake, wished Jonathan hadn't been hurt, wished the family could have stayed whole. I wish that too. Sophie eventually came back to the States. She and Mako split up. She moved to Nashville to be closer to the kids. We weren't friends, but we were civil co-parents. It worked well enough. The kids are grown now. Jacob's a teacher. Lily's studying medicine. They both turned out better than I ever hoped. Strong, kind, smart. They know the story, know about the Donovans, about the trust fund. They don't judge me for it. They understand. And me. I still run the company. Still live in Nashville. Still think about my father sometimes. About the way he worked until his heart gave out. About my mother who raised me in poverty when I could have been raised in wealth. I don't know if I did the right thing. Don't know if taking the money, fighting for the company, destroying Jonathan's life was worth it. But I know I did what I had to do. I survived. I fought. I won. And sometimes that's all you can ask for.